Um, Thank you for joining us all. And so I have started the study circle. It's not that like it's not that just the movement we give solidarity. It's also like we need to address other issues which are going on the ground level. And so we all know Sai Baba was a long-term comrade who was voicing for the rights of the marginalized people in the country and who himself was imprisoned for 10 years. And in his experience, he has gone through things that uh, prisoners are are majorly from marginalized communities, and some of them are even not aware about what are the charges filed on them. So he was writing, RTA, what are the charges filed on them, and he was trying to give legal advice and help to the people who are mostly from the you know Dalit communities and Adivasis or Muslims. That we all know that 70-80% of the prisoners are in India are like from these marginalized communities, and most of them are under trial prisoners. Um, so I thought like when we when I so ILS conducted a program on remembering Sai Baba. I attended that program, and fellow comrades who have been working with Sai Baba for for many years. I mean, as associates, advised that we can conduct a programs on Sai Baba name. Yes, that's a good idea. And then what we can do in the first case, as he himself was a victim of prison, we can go with how we can go with Indian context, how we can go with the abolition of prison and business condition as well. And we have Sukanya Shantha have been working for 16 years in the like a senior journalist who is working on prisoners and their conditions. And so also there is a thing called caste has been included in the manual. Works in the prisons allocated based upon the caste. It's been like in practice for last 150 years, like more 200 years, which is actually uh, unacceptable in democratic country as well. But still 70 years it's been like it's practiced as a legit as a rule. I thought like people suggested Sukanya Shantha would be a good speaker to discuss about how in a broad way what has in the context how this Indian prison has been practiced the caste and why should it be abolished, like the prison system why it exists in the country where the 80% of people from the marginalized communities and charges that these prisons are used against the uh, protesters who question the government and political prisoners and like and we know that white collar criminals and what are going in India, like they are free from the prisons who can afford their legal service or whatever the people are right, they're right to be free, but people who cannot afford it are marginalized, oppressed, are victim of the prison system. So I thought like we can conduct the series of programs on prisons. In first case, as Sai Baba Study Circle will give solidarity, but the movements also will work on the uh, various things which people are like come together. Uh, so I thank you all for joining us, and your opinions and suggestions also will be welcome. And I will move. I will pass this to Praveen, who goes to moderate.
Sure. Thank you so much, Ramu. I am Praveen. I'm part of a collective called India Labour Solidarity, which is in London. And we thank Ramu and Professor Sai Baba Study Circle to uh, allow us to join in this important discussion, which is about abolition and its condition in the context of Indian prisons. And as Ramu was saying, we are very privileged to be joined by Sukanya, who has done some extraordinary work around prisons and has been lauded by Supreme Court recently for in their in their observation about uh, caste and use of caste in prison manuals and and has done some great work with Pulitzer Center under a series called Bard, and she's been senior researcher with previous experience in Amnesty. So we couldn't have picked a better person to speak to about abolition and also what are the conditions in prisons. So to set some context around, I'm going to be moderating the session. So um, like I mean, keep your cameras if you feel on, if you feel comfortable. Uh, Mute your mics. I think everyone's mics are muted anyways. There will be. We'll ask the. I'll set some context around the basics of prison abolition and what the conversation is around uh, globally initially, and then we'll have a discussion with Sukanya to say what does it mean in Indian context, especially with what Sukanya has found in her work. So yeah, so in terms of the if you think of abolition, the basic premise of abolition is around the fact about uh, the harm by which is done by policing. So policing suppresses marginalized populations, and it creates harm in racist or oppressive patterns which are reflective of the society. So in the West, it is race. In India, it definitely is caste and religion. And I think when you think of abolition, uh, it, the second tenet of abolition is a misconception of policing. So, policing, what abolitionists believe is that policing does not effectively prevent harm or solve serious crimes, and policing as a mechanism fails to meet its supposed purpose of ensuring safety. So, the core argument is policing causes harm and therefore should be replaced and cannot be reformed, and resources allocated to policing should be directed towards community welfare, which is healthcare, education, housing, and jobs. And prisons have never served for neither reform or control of crime, but rather taken as a tool to punish the oppressed and political prisoners in some contexts. So, yeah, so I think this is where we would like to uh, understand what this understanding means in Indian context. And I think if you look at the historical context in the origins of policing, it was around 1857 Sepoy rebellion time, where it was used as a colonial tool to control uh, the Indian uh, population at that time. And we have seen that, even though, like, I mean, in the more recent context, how it has been used to control dissent and protect the ruling class interests. So that is some context. And in terms of the current Indian prisons, which Ramu just briefly touched about, as of April 2024, 530,000 people are in prisons, and 74.6% are under trials. So they haven't been charged yet, which is quite a unique phenomenon to India, because in the UK, I think if you don't charge a person within 24 to 48 hours, you cannot hold them unless there is serious exceptions. But I mean, I think UK police is as oppressive, but I think there is a big difference in how you can hold a person in prison without a charge, in a way. But we know that systemic delays and biases lead to over incarceration of vulnerable groups. So, which we'll get to in this discussion. So, feel free to ask your questions in the chat, which we'll get to. So, we hope that this we'll start with some questions which are pre-prepared, but after that we will hopefully have time for discussion. So, Sukanya, thank you so much again for joining. So, should we start with uh, like basic premise of why do prison exists in India, and what they do?
Uh, sure. Thank you so much, actually, both Ramu and Praveen, for inviting me for this conversation today on abolition. And uh, can't expect a better platform than a study circle that is created after Professor G. N. Sai Baba. Um, I would actually want to call this more a conversation than a lecture, because my understanding also around abolition is still in a very formative stage, and I expect, like, through this conversation to actually understand, learn a few things. Your question about why do prisons exist? So prison as a structure exists around the singular notion of safety, and both the state and the society believes that uh, prisons must exist to ensure safety of of the society outside. So if a deviant is actually in chains, then the world outside would feel safer to live in. Uh, so also like if I were to like refer to Angela Davis's work, Are Prison Obsolete? She says like both life and birth, life and death, birth and death. Like we have accepted prison as an inevitable fact of our life, and we are unable to actually think of any other way, of any other possible of any of the possibilities of actually. Uh, Hello,
Yeah, we can hear you.
hello.
Yes, please go ahead. We can hear you.
Looks like there was a technical issue, so she will wait. We'll wait for Sukanya to come back.
Or you can text her on WhatsApp something. Right.
Yeah, I will check. She's back now. Hi, Sukanya, are you
Am I
back?
audible?
Yeah, you are.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, sorry. Uh, so so yeah, like as in like the what I was talking about, like how like Professor Davis actually explains this whole thing about how prison is understood as like it's an inevitable fact of our life, like as in, like birth, death, and prison also exist around the same notion, and one is unable to actually think of any possibility where a society can exist without the prison's existence. Uh, the work that has actually gone into in understanding the carceral system, the carceral state, particularly in India, has actually focused on making prisons a better place. Uh, Most of the organizations that work in India, be it the domestic or the international organizations, funded small organization which is actually trying to like make sense of the space. All of them are actually working around this whole notion of uh, prisons will exist and we just have to make it more livable. uh, we are not able to actually imagine or think or talk about dismantling these structures. Uh, Professor Davis also like speaks about an ideological framework which is very crucial, which is very important to counter the carceral state. Uh, if I were to actually look at all these organizations which have been working for a very long time, some of them have actually existed for 30, 40, 50 years. Uh, and I have been actually writing work. I have worked in prison space in the past. I've actually been writing on prisons for a very long time. I've been actually seeing their work very closely, but I'm unable to actually understand or like point what could their ideological framework would be like. What exactly is their driving force? What is their politics? What is their end goal that they are actually working towards? Do they even consider abolition as a possibility? Uh, I don't like really see that as something that is around which most of these organizations actually work. Uh, to cite actually one of the examples about prisons would be just 2 years ago. Devendra Fadnavis, who was the chief minister of Maharashtra, one of the states in Western India, he had actually announced building new prisons in Maharashtra. And the rationale was that we are unable to actually accommodate as many the growing number of incarcerated persons in the state, so we need more prisons. The prison population in Maharashtra actually it, 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 it's somewhere between 45 to 50,000. And it keeps going up, like during COVID, where most states were actually trying to bring down the overcrowding in the prisons. In Maharashtra, particularly, the prison population had actually gone up exponentially. So when Fadnavis actually spoke about building new prisons, I was actually very curiously trying to like understand, very keenly trying to understand how are most of these organizations responding to Fadnavis's call for building new prisons. Uh, None of the organizations, none of these like academics or researchers who are working, especially in India, actually spoke up against this whole this government's like need to build new prisons. In fact, the only person who had actually spoken about it was the President of India, Draupadi Murmu. She actually, in one of her speeches, she said that like we have to like actually stop building new jails. There is a need to like actually bring a complete end to building new jails. Uh, so yeah, like so organizations which are dedicatedly working in these spaces are unable to think of dismantling the prison space.
Right. Thank you for that context, Sukanya. So, yeah, I think it's very interesting that you that the organizations you're working on prisons, you say you don't know where they come from, but the prisons in India are called correctional services center. So, can you give any context around why they are called so, and do they actually live up to their name?
Well, so this is a very new phenomenon actually. Earlier, it was only West Bengal which called itself the prisons in West Bengal called itself correctional services, and now it's a fad that has actually picked on, and other states have also begun calling itself correctional services. And the whole idea is primarily like we will correct the criminal behavior amongst persons who are incarcerated, and that's about it. As in like it begins and ends with that whole idea. uh, if you were to ask me, do we really have any inclination or any uh, like a framework to work towards correction? Like correction in itself is like I do not know what it really would like what correction would really mean. But if one were to actually ask about if there is a framework that exists to uh, to actually work with the prisoners, no, it doesn't. Our in India, like according to the NCRB data, we have around 1,360 prisons. These prisons are supposed to accommodate already like these prisons have very confined spaces, and the space made available to an individual is actually measured in inches, and like these spaces are given to the prisoner, to an incarcerated person. uh, in this space, like around the prison actual prison population is supposed to be around 3.5 lakhs, but the prison population goes up to 5.5, even 6 lakhs at some point. Like during COVID, that was the problem. Uh, so your resources are limited. Your uh, like facilities that are made available to prison to incarcerated persons are limited. Your prison budget has not gone up in I do not know how many years. Uh, in some prisons, the over crowding actually has the occupancy rate is as high as 600%. Like some prisons of Bastar, like you where the prison the actual capacity of the prison must be like around 400 or 500, and you have more than like 5,000 people actually like accommodated in that spaces. So it's crazy like the way these prison spaces actually operate, and then to call it a correctional service, and then to actually assume that the ones who are actually kept in prisons, they are going to become a better person when they actually step out of the prison. It's a joke. Like as in like that's not what our our government, like any of our state machineries or even our judiciary is actually working towards. It's not the case.
Yeah, and when and I know you speak to a lot of the people who run the prisons in a way. What do they think they are doing there? Because
Yeah, yeah. So I
yeah.
only recently actually I wrote about one of the prisons in Rajasthan. There's a central prison in Rajasthan's Jaipur district. I wrote a story on the basis of several letters that had actually that a lot of like over a dozen incarcerated persons, some convicted, some who have been facing prolonged incarceration, had written to me, and in those letters they had in detail written about they're like the inhuman treatment that has been meted out to them, the impossibility of actually surviving in that space, the different kind of punishments that have been actually given to them just for having spoken up, or for speaking up. So for this story, like I just 3 4 days ago, I actually happened to call up the superintendent and of the prison, and I was speaking to him, trying to understand uh, how he actually looks at these complaints. Uh, Interestingly, he was not even one bit rattled that a whole bunch of incarcerated persons have actually written to a journalist outside. That didn't bother him. Uh, he was constantly trying to tell me that these are jobless, absolutely aimless bunch of people who are actually in jail. They, because of lack of anything better to do in life, that's the reason they have decided to actually write these letters. Much of what is their figment of imagination. And he also speaks about so he says that, like, who are these people? Like, these people are the ones who are literate. Like, so the literacy rate of prisons is like very low. Like, as you would have like not more than 20% of the prison population is actually lettered. So so he was trying to tell me that the ones who are actually creating trouble are the literate ones, are the ones who have actually have schooling, are the ones who are able to write. And uh, his constant he was trying to constantly sell this whole idea of, like, maybe there are not so many people who are writing the letter to you. Maybe it is only one person who's writing multiple letters and trying to like actually create a scene. So all of what he was trying to say about these are like bunch of jobless people who are doing things in the prison. Uh, at one point, I asked him, like, your prisons are called correctional services. So uh, how do you understand the whole idea of correctional services, and what are the different things? Because you're saying they're jobless and aimless, so how are you keeping them engaged? Because if you are meant to actually correct, then there should be something, some vocation that you should actually start inside prison. The man with 25 years of experience of actually being in the prison services didn't have an answer to that. Like, he just did not know what to say. And that's pretty much how our prison service, like the prisons actually work across different states. It's not just like one Jaipur prison that I'm actually citing an example of. That's pretty much how it is across the country.
So there is not even a facade that they are trying to do something. It's just very, very blatant. So, okay. So you just mentioned, like, I mean, the types of people who are in prison. So can you give more context around who are these people in prisons? What is their composition and across
Yeah.
various demographics we have?
So the only thing that is the only data that is available to us is something that the state actually, the government, the Home Ministry, the Central Home Ministry releases annually. Uh, this data hasn't come out, like, we are now into 2025. The last data that was made available to us was from 2022. Uh, the data says, and this data is very unscientifically collected. There is a lot of problems in in this data, and that's like another conversation altogether that one could have. Uh, but the data says that, from whatever is available to us, over 70% of the prison population come from scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and among them a large chunk are from the other backward classes. Uh, the data is incomplete because it doesn't actually tell us the caste composition of the Muslim and the Christian communities. So our understanding of Muslims as a like, we do not actually have any understanding of who among the Muslim communities or who among the Christian community actually end up in prison. So Muslims are another, like, Christians are a small population, but Muslims are another big chunk that actually end up in prison. My experience of having worked on human rights, and particularly on the policing and on prisons for such a long time, I've understood, and also the data that I have gathered in my field work, I've understood that most of these prisoners who come from the Muslim and Christian background are mostly Pasmanda or Bahujan caste people. So the prison population, when you look at it, it is from the marginalized identities and marginalized caste identities across religion. Uh, they are mostly unlettered. They are mostly landless. They are like yeah, like so that's pretty much like their education, gender, and caste is like is what I was trying to say. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So as you expect, like I mean, with uh, the society there, the caste dynamics play a big role in terms of who ends up in prison and who has the resources to avoid prison in a way. So so and your work on caste in prisons is for people who are not aware of. Can you probably tell why, like, I mean, how caste practices came to exist in Indian prisons?
Uh, so caste actually exists in prison in multiple forms. Some of which we might actually not even be privy to. Like we wouldn't even know like the different ways in which caste exists in prisons. Uh, how I understand the prison structure is like it's an extension of the society outside. Uh, with one very solid difference is that in the world outside, one is able to at least there's a possibility of fighting back. Even the weakest are able to put out like some fight, like some resistance with whatever means that is available. Uh, there is at least a notion of agency that exists in the world outside the prison. Uh, but inside prison, uh, the, all these possibilities are nullified. Like there is absolutely no possibility of fighting back. So stories like and whatever little stories that we hear of, like say suicide, torture, discrimination, death, they're like a minuscule percentage of what exactly what perhaps could be happening inside prison. Like this data comes to us because the government has actually put out some data, or because some human rights organization has at some point in time managed to have an access to these spaces, and then we have actually found out about it. And or maybe like some incarcerated person has managed to somehow like actually have some communication outside in with the world outside. So uh, when I actually began to, so a couple of years ago in 2020, when I actually worked on a series of stories under this project called The Bard. Uh, and this was done in collaboration, we got like funding, like me and my colleague Janvi Sen. The two of us actually got funding from the Pulitzer Center, where to just travel across the country. It was a very ambitious project where we were trying to look at various aspects of prison, and of which one was caste. And the whole idea of that story was generally to capture as much narrative of caste experiences of both the, uh, the Dalit Bahujan Adivasi persons, and also of the Savarnas. Like their whole caste experiences is what we were trying to actually capture in that story. So while I was trying to like read the story, work on the story, I also thought like maybe I could actually look at existing documents uh, that might have existing literature on caste in prisons. Uh, Barring say one research work that was done on discrimination in caste by NCDHR, there was absolutely nothing that existed at that point in time. And NCDHR also was looking at it was more on the experiential level, and was like it had a lot of anecdotes, a lot of narratives of incarcerated individuals who must have actually faced uh, uh, some sort of violence, caste discrimination because of their caste identities. So, so I just thought like maybe I could actually do a little more research work on and try to understand if there is any government document which speaks about caste. And the first place where I saw the mention of caste was in the prison rules. So prison in India is a state subject. So every state has its own prison manual, and that prison manual decides how a prison in that particular state would actually operate, would actually function. So these manuals mention a whole bunch of things about how much food should be offered to a person, how much space should be offered to a person to sit, to sleep, how prisoners, like a woman prisoner, can actually have her child who's under 6 years of age, can have like can is allowed to actually let the child stay in the prison. So how much food is to be given, how much milk is to be given, everything is actually measured and written in that prison manual. The prison manual also extensively speaks about the labor work that can actually be carried, that needs to be carried out in the prison work, in the prison space, be it gardening, be it carpentry, cooking, sweeping, plumbing, masonry, like all of this work is actually very clearly, categorically written in this prison manual. In that, they also mention the caste identities of each of these individuals who are supposed to do a certain kind of work. So that was my first time that I was actually coming across something which is actually in a form of rule, a law that is followed by states. So to cite an example, say in prison of in Rajasthan, the prison manual very specifically spoke about the Dalit castes like the Mehtar community, which is a scheduled caste and which has a long history of having forced to carry out this occupation of sweeping in this and of doing the work of manual scavenging in the state. So it says that this is the caste which will actually continue to do the work of cleaning and manual scavenging inside prison. It mentions the barber caste. It says that the barber caste individual would actually be given the job of shaving and cutting hair of other prisoners. It then speaks about the high priestly caste, that is the term that is used in Rajasthan, was used in Rajasthan manual. Brahmin priestly caste, people would be assigned the work of cooking in the prison. So it's as explicit as this. And then there are so that was the first time I actually like realized, okay, this is how caste is actually mentioned in different manuals. Like similarly in UP, in West Bengal, in across like some 2021 states, like we found like caste is mentioned in different forms. There are some states which doesn't mention caste, like in the case of say Tamil Nadu. At the very face of it, Tamil Nadu prison manual looked okay. It looked all right. It didn't like have any explicit mention of caste, and one would then assume that the practice is not going on. But they had something else. They had actually, besides over and above what the prison manual says, they had actually come up with a new practice of segregating prisoners on the basis of their caste. So in the southern part of Tamil Nadu, which also has had a long history of caste-based violence and also caste-based assertion. Uh, in that in one of the districts, Madurai, there is this one central prison called Palayam Kotai prison, where the barracks were actually the structure of barracks were made in such a way that a person belonging to, say, a Thevar caste, which is an OBC caste, but a dominant, considered to be dominant caste in Tamil Nadu, would have a separate barrack. At the same time, somebody coming from a Pallar caste, which is considered to be, which is a scheduled caste, is will have a separate barrack. So they were like barracks assigned to people as per their caste, and these barracks were also structured in such a way that somebody who came from a dominant, more aggressive, more landed, more moneyed caste would have better access to the prison office, the canteen, the mess services, and the castes which are smaller, which are which doesn't really have the wherewithal to fight back, which doesn't have the money, which doesn't really have any clout, would actually be placed somewhere much far, like far away from the prison administration. So this is another kind of caste-based discrimination that I actually like came across during this investigative work that we were doing. There was also a separate problem that we actually came across that was about the Vimukta community, the denotified, the nomadic communities of in India. Like there are like around close to 150 communities which were criminalized in the colonial times, and has had a long history of being criminalized, and the entire community. In some cases, you have like entire family being picked up in some petty crimes, and they overrepresent our prison spaces. So most of these manuals actually speak about if there are any positive discrimination that has to be done amongst prisoners, among the incarcerated persons. It says that a person of good conduct, a person of so many, if it has spent so many years, has actually behaved a certain way, should be given some leeway, should be given some special provisions, except the person coming from the wandering tribe, from the criminal tribe, from communities which has a tendency of indulging in who are habitual criminals, who has a tendency of indulging in crimes repeatedly. So these are the words that are actually mentioned in the prison manual. So yeah, like as in, and these manuals have actually existed for from pre-independence era. Like these are like all like are they are all the from the British colonial times they have actually existed, and they've gone through some kind of uh, like amendments, some kind of improvements over years. But these aspects have like the present state, the Indian state actually thought like these aspects don't need any kind of addressing, and even when caste-based discrimination is abolished, where like as in you cannot actually compel somebody to continue doing some kind of labor work because that is considered to be bonded labor. That is also an unconstitutional thing, but it existed for so many years, like for good, like for close to like 8 decades, like it has actually continued in our prison manual.
Wow. I mean, I think there's so much to unpick there, but I think it's so. I mean, I think without your work, I guess this would have still continued in a way because in and to see that in such a systemic way where it has been all documented in manuals and everything will kind of give an indication of how caste is a part of the social fabric in India, and I think, as you said, prison is just an extension of what you see outside. And I think the point about how you are deemed a criminal by descent is something people need to be aware of. Is that there are tribes and some castes who are called Vimukta, who are deemed to be criminals in a way. So they are under constant surveillance from the state, and that continues till today. So that is a strong argument to say actually the system is not correct because it has gone on for so long. And in terms of the under trials, so can you talk something about under trials, like in terms of, we know that there is a large number of people who are under trials, and how is their situation different to the convicted people in the prisons?
Uh, so I would say like the situation of both the pre-trial detainees and of the convicts like it's really bad. Uh, but the nature of struggle differs. Uh, an under trial prisoner actually who faces like prolonged incarceration and is awaiting their trial for uh, for for number of years, and they, by the time their actually fate is decided, like even if the court actually decides to acquit them, in most cases they must have actually at least spent more than half of the actual punishment that could have been that could be granted under the section that they were booked. So most people, like if I were booked for say theft, and for theft, if the quantum of punishment is say for 3 years, maximum quantum of punishment could be for 3 years. But invariably, we find that people don't come out on bail before 2.5 years, and or even if they are actually acquitted, the acquittal takes that much time. The acquittal takes sometimes like 2.5, 3 years, or maybe even more. So the so the pre-trial detainees actually end up spending uh, like there is very little to actually then differentiate between who's a pre-trial detainee and who's a convict, because punishment is actually applied in both cases. Uh,
Yes.
I would say like still slightly an under trial prisoner is able to like see in a sense, like when it comes to accessing the outside world, as a pre-trial detainee, like you do have your court dates coming up every 14 days. Every 14 days, the judiciary is like it actually gives you it puts you in jail in under judicial custody for 14 days, and it has to be renewed. So in an ideal situation, you would be produced before the court. That means you are able to set out of the prison space, go in the outside world, in whatever, in a escorted police vehicle, but whatever, like you are able to see the world outside. You're able to see vehicles, you're able to see trees, plants, like you're able to see the human existence outside the prison space. And then you go to court. In court hearings, usually what happens is there is an escort party that is actually sent from every prison. So say in Mumbai, if like say from Arthur Road prison, if there are like 3 jeep full of people who are actually sent to the sessions court in South Mumbai. So all of them will actually be taken in the morning, and for logistic purpose, they would be actually kept in the prison until evening, and they will be brought back in a group, because it's also like safety, security, like law and order situation, all of that has to be taken care. The state actually thinks of it in that sense. Because they are actually spending so many hours in prison, they're able to meet their family members. I'm able to meet most of them in when they come for the hearing. Like that is how I actually report. Like I end up like sitting in prisons for the entire in courts entire day, because I don't get an access inside prison. So I sit in prisons in court, and that is where I actually interact with people. So there is some semblance of uh, some normal life. Like there is some soft emotions involved, where you are able to actually like interact with your friends, their family, even with other prisoners, or even with your lawyers, like some free air. A convicted prisoner doesn't actually get that. Like a convicted prisoner has already gone through all of this, and has actually ended up in prison. And until they come out, they are banished from actually accessing or interacting with the outside world. Uh, having that's perhaps the only good part of being an under trial prisoner. Uh, the labor work, as in like the kind of labor work that pre-trial detainee is actually subjected to. Uh, Labor is supposed to be a voluntary thing inside prison, both for convicted and for under trial prisoner. There is nothing voluntary in prisons, as a, like even though it is in concept it is meant to be that way, it doesn't work that way. So our prison manual doesn't mention anything about labor work to be done by the under trial prisoner, because you are not convicted. You Our law says that like you're considered to be innocent unless proved guilty. So you're not supposed to be doing any work, but the prison space expects you to do that work, and hence it is done for free of cost. You do not get any money for the labor that you actually provide inside prison. The labor it goes on for like 8 hours to 10 hours a day, and you get absolutely no money. It's like zero money, and you do that because there is absolutely no other choice left with you. Uh, a convicted prisoner, on the other hand, is paid some money, but that money is as less as 60 rupees, 30 rupees, 20 rupees for that one day work that you have done. It is much lower than the minimum wages that you actually get in India. In some states, like our minimum wages are, I think it ranges between 280 to 450 rupees. In some states, it's like I think Karnataka is like around 350 or something. So it's that high, and but in comparison, it's very little, but still some money is given to you, like you get some money at the end of it. uh yeah, and the whole as in and like you I think you were mentioning, or Ramu was mentioning about that about you are actually kept in prison without being charged. Like you're charged actually, as in once you there are different phases of trial. So once you are arrested, you are actually taken into police custody or into judicial custody. In police custody, you would be kept in a lockup, or judicial custody, you'll be kept in a prison. Uh, Lockup as in the police lockup. Uh, when you are in a judicial custody, depending upon the section, the law that is actually like used in the case of an individual, the police has a timeline to file a charge sheet. So in some cases it's 30 days, in some law, under some law it is a 60 days, under some law like the UAPA, which is the most draconian that law to exist right now, it is 180 days. And until that time, the police has a right to can take that much time to actually file the charge sheet. And if the police fails to file the charge sheet, you are supposed to get something called a default bail. So if the police fails to file a charge sheet in say 90 days, on the 91st day, the prisoner can actually come to court and say that the charge sheet has not been filed and I am supposed to be set free. Now, this can happen only in the case where you have a good lawyer or you are aware of your legal rights. Even if I don't have a lawyer, I should know that I should be set free in 90 days. Or somebody inside the prison has actually done some kind of legal aid work where they have helped me to understand my rights. In the absence of any of that, the police is able to actually continue with keeping you in jail. The judiciary has not cared about your freedom at all, and you continue to be in jail even after 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 180 days, whatever those days, that the stipulated days in which the police was supposed to actually file the charge sheet, they continue to actually be in prison. And most often you actually find prisoners who have been in jail under trial detainees because they do not have legal representation. And legal representation, mind you, is a constitutional right. Under Article 39A, your government is supposed to actually provide you a legal aid if you do not have your own lawyer. But I think I could very comfortably say like 60 to 70% of our prisoners, like our incarcerated persons, do not have a lawyer, like a lawyer who's capable of actually, first of all, a lawyer, or even if they have a lawyer who's capable of actually fighting these cases. So most of them actually end up in prison because they do not really have adequate legal support, or they do not have money to furnish bail. Like in so many cases, you have like the court has granted bail to an individual and has granted bail against say 10,000 rupees bail bond, but the person doesn't have that money, and because you are not able to execute that surety, that bail amount, then you end up actually staying, like you're staying your incarceration gets prolonged even further. So yeah, like as in there are just so many different issues like actually that the under trial prisoners actually struggle with.
Cool.
And a convicted prisoner has actually gone through all of those struggles and there has ended up being the convicted prisoner.
Thank you. I think there are so many points that we could talk about, but I think a good follow up was Shruti was asking, like, how do you do your research? Can you say something about your methods if you can, because so much of it is kept under.
Yeah. So in my case, like, I do certainly have a certain edge over other journalists. Because of my training, I have studied law, and I've also worked in prisons. Like I have worked. So I've been a journalist for a long time, but in between I had taken a break and I had actually gone into research field, and I was working with Amnesty International as a researcher working on prisons, and I had managed, like, because Amnesty had actually a permission from the High Court and from the legal, National Legal Aid Authority. We had an unbridled access to all prisons across Karnataka. So that actually allowed me to access prisons of Karnataka for over 2 years without any absolutely any problems from the state, from the government. So that helped me like a great deal. And also I've covered judiciary as a beat in the past, like as a cub reporter, and also like a reporter like who had just begun for a long time. So I've built that kind of contacts with lawyers, human rights lawyers, with prisoners. So all of that has actually helped me in building some kind of understanding. When it comes to research, uh, like most of us do not have an access to prison space, and especially after the 2012 Delhi gang rape case, there was this one documentary film, India's Daughter, that came out from prisons, where the documentary filmmaker had actually gone about interviewing all those men who were accused of and later convicted and even hanged for the gang rape. That After that documentary film came out, the MHA, the Ministry of Home Department, actually came out with a direction saying that no more researchers, documentary filmmakers, or journalists will be allowed inside prison. And the prison authorities have actually followed that particular direction to the T. They've not allowed anyone access. So because prison is beyond our reach right now, one has to like very creatively think of ways of meeting prisoners. And I've realized that incarcerated person doesn't have to be met only in the four walls of prison. Like you have so many different ways that one actually can meet and talk to. One way of engaging I have over years, like over the past 10 years, I've tried is building contacts. As a court reporter, I would actually be in courts for long hours and would actually then you don't only just cover what is happening in the court hearing, but also building some kind of rapport. And then I started writing letters to them. So I would actually send questions to them directly, like when they would come to court, and they would take those questions and aram se, like they would actually write those right responses and come back, or maybe send it through their lawyers. And now I've reached a point where, because they've also realized that I have actually been collecting, like I've been obsessively writing about it. They have found their own ways of like reaching out to me. Like after this particular judgment, I have had like letters. Well, some people have written letters of appreciation. At the same time, some people have written me long letters, like 15, 20 pages of letter, a long letter, like talking about some thousand other issues that needs to be addressed. So like that's the way like I have actually gone about doing it. And this particular method of research has worked in my case. And yeah, like I said, like the legwork is the only way, because the government doesn't want you to actually have these stories out. And the existing organizations which are working inside prison are also working with the permission of the state government. So the moment they actually even turn like one bit say radical, their permission to enter the space will completely be taken away. So it's difficult to actually get through them. So yeah, like one has to just do the grunt work and like just be out on the field. Yeah, that's how it has worked in my case. I hope I answered. Yeah.
Sounds like you've been very resourceful and yeah, I think your work speaks for itself. So before we get to the question, I know there were a couple of things in the chat, but you touched about judiciary there, like in terms of what legal support people get. Like, can you say anything else about the judiciary, role of judiciary in the current system that we have got?
Yeah. So when we actually pin down responsibility, we talk about how the state is failing its citizen and how it is ill-treating. I think the bigger responsibility here is of the judiciary. Uh, an incarcerated person is in a judicial custody. The custodian of them, of those in prison, is the judiciary. So any individual who is sent inside the jail, the person's welfare, the person's life, the person's liberty, all of it is actually dependent on the judiciary's functioning. And we have enough and more examples to actually cite about how the judiciary has failed us. Uh, just like from the very basic magisterial level to the Supreme Court. Our Supreme Courts and our High Courts have time and again come up with like some very like in their heads very radical idea of like jail should be an exception, bail should be a norm. They've come up with all these coinages, and they've spoken about like how overcrowding has to be taken up very seriously. But when you look at the lower judiciary, every work, so judiciary, the work that like all of us working professionals, we are actually assessed for the kind of work we do, and at the end of it, we get appraised, and like we get our appraisals every month, every year. Similarly, the judiciary also has an appraisal pattern. Uh, they have something called um, point system. So basically, every work that a judge does, it has some kind of point. So disposal of case will have like some 5 points. Like arbitration would have some kind of points. Like there are like point system that is actually put out. Bail doesn't have any point. Bail is zero. So when there is no point given to the bail system, to granting of bail or taking care of the bail applications, when there is no points actually allocated to it, they don't want to actually take it up because like there is absolutely no incentive attached to it. And for everything else, there is incentive. There is very high incentive for civil matters, for property matters.
Mm.
So disposal of property cases has very high points. I think some 7, 10 something, some points. Recently, I was actually a part of some consultation, and then one judicial officer was actually talking about all of this, and that's how I gathered it. And it's across the country, like that's how the point system works. Uh, if you're not incentivizing it, there is absolutely no reason why a judge would actually feel interested, inclined to think, talk, consider somebody's freedom as a very important issue because it's not important for the judiciary clearly. So that's exactly how the our judiciary is working. And in the same consultation, actually, the judicial officer also mentioned about the very creative ways in which the police, when they come to court, they bring a person, an individual, to the court in such a way that incarceration can be prolonged, and before they can be before the judge actually or before the person the jailed person actually reaches the point of applying for bail or getting a bail executed, uh, a few weeks have already passed. So in that he was mentioning about how a police would invariably produce a person before an evening court, that is after the court hours, and on a Friday, Saturday and Sunday being a non-working day. So when a person comes there, and even if the crime, and this happens in the case where the crime under which the person is accused is of a weak kind, and where they know, like, the moment they actually come to court, if a good lawyer appears, then they can actually be granted bail immediately. But in this case, they will be brought on a Friday, and then Saturday, Sunday, like, there will be absolutely no hearing. And then on, and they would actually say, they would ask for police can take up to 14 days of police custody in, say, simple crime, in crime that is actually defined under the IPC, the Indian Penal Code, which is now changed to name that I cannot just remember, but Bharatiya Nyaya Sahita. And then under UAP, under other laws, other special laws, then, like, the custody can be up to 1 month. So the police will take it only for 2 or 3 days, and then for 3 days they will take the person's custody. They manage it till, say, Monday or Tuesday. On that day, but then the accused person's lawyer will come and file a bail application. Then for the bail application, the prosecution would say that we will take some time to actually file a response. So they will ask for 2 or 3 more days. In that, like, an entire week is passed, and then then the hearing would come like a week after. That was like 10 days later, and during that hearing, they would actually say that we have made some recovery. We have found some recovery in the case, and we want the accused person's custody again because they have so many days still left, and they would actually take custody once again. And then again, then the bail application that was passed earlier will become redundant because those aspects are
Mm.
not included in it. So that's how, like, different ways in which the police works, and judiciary is aware of it. Judiciary knows the police is using these tactics time and again in almost all cases to just keep the person behind bars. Uh, but is the magistrate doing anything? No, the magistrate is not doing anything because magistrate's interest is not does not lie in getting the person granted bail. The magistrate would rather, like, just want, like, get done with it and take up another case which would give him some point. And he has to earn that, like, 10 point, 15 point, 20 points. I do not know how much, but on a monthly basis. So then
Wow.
monthly analysis actually happens. So that's how exactly it works. Yeah, yeah,
I wasn't aware of these
yeah.
points,
Even I got to know only very recently about
but, but it seems like it kind of shows actually whose interest is are these laws protecting. It's a capital interests that they are trying to protect, and which is reflective in the points they assign in a way. So right. So thank you for that. And coming back to the one of the points which was made in the chat by Lake, and also about political prisoners and how they're being targeted by the current government. But also, do you also want to touch about what do you feel about, like, why we concentrate on when we talk about prisoners, we tend to restrict that conversation to political prisoners, and what your thoughts are on that?
So in a way, like how I understand, and I think that would be like a general definition of the word political prisoner too, are those who are actually arrested for a political act, uh, who are considered affront to the state, and somebody like the state doesn't want them to do what they're doing. Like basically, they're like some they are uh, so
Okay, wait. Looks like
Yes.
Sukanya.
Sure.
Let me just message her.
I think Praveen, it's not just the political prisoners what Lake is saying. It's also when Sukanya was
Yeah,
mentioning about the places like in Bastar where you have the limit of
yeah,
500, but they are like there is there are the number of prisons are like 5,000. Those people are
yeah,
all of them are political prisoners. Like most of them, all
yeah,
of them
yeah.
from the Adivasi community.
I think
So
that's what
these
Sukanya
places
was.
also,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm
yeah,
So,
sorry, like I think there is some
yeah,
problem with the Wi-Fi. So sorry, so sorry.
no, no, that's
Yeah.
okay.
So like yeah, as in like, who are these political prisoners? I mean like somebody who is an affront to the state, somebody who is arrested for the political activities. In India, uh, the term has come to be synonymous with individuals having left or ultra left ideologies. Uh, the like while the whole issue of imprisonment of the political prisoners is a very serious one, and it requires a lot of thinking and deliberation. uh, I think it is also very limiting when we talk about prisons. Like it actually limits our whole discussion around the carceral state when the focus is just kept on on a political prisoner. And also like who uh, as an who gets to be called a political prisoner, no? Like somebody say a tribe which has been criminalized for centuries, and just your identity is considered to be uh, that of a criminal because of the political dissent that your ancestors had actually put out against the British. Do they get to actually be a part of the discourse around political prisoner? We know that's not been the case. Uh, would we allow the same kind of definition of political prisoner for say a member of ISIS to be called a political prisoner? We wouldn't, right? So this whole who actually gets to use the label of political prisoner in India is also actually there's only certain class or certain caste that actually gets to use that particular identity. And
Yeah,
the leftist struggle has actually been against class society, right? And
yeah,
here we have created a separate class amongst prisoners. And if I were to actually refer to say the prison manual of West Bengal, is perhaps the only state in India which allows which actually accepts a category called political prisoner, and it speaks about certain privileges. Like privileges are like these are like barely a privilege, but still it says that political prisoners are entitled to things like access to books, better quality food, open air facilities inside prison. But should these things and we've actually had so many applications put out by the individuals who actually identify themselves as political prisoners, actually making these applications saying that we want these special provisions to be given to us. So the moment you actually think about these as special provisions, and it also means that it is not essential for other prisoners, for
mm,
other incarcerated persons. So I personally I have I feel extreme discomfort when we talk about political prisoner as a category. Uh, if you look at the prison population, there are like 5 lakh. If 5 lakh is what the prison population is today, not even 1% of that would fall under the political prisoner category. So we're talking about less than 5,000
mm,
persons, individuals, and there is like the media which actually writes about not the mainstream but the ones which actually writes about human rights, which writes about issues of prisons. they have actually given a disproportionate attention towards the political prisoner category. Um, while they do that, and while it is important, like where that attention is important, it also takes away our any possibility of writing or talking about other issues. Like Omar Khalid's bail application has been pending for so many years. Is a matter of outrage, is a matter of campaign, is a matter of discussion, is a matter of long articles and editorials. But that's something that is commonly happening uh, to to the entire prison population. And then the outrage is not seen, then the discussion is not seen, then we do not have actually have any space in newspapers where editorials are actually written around it. So
Yeah,
so to me, like, I feel that the whole idea of political prisoner is it limits our understanding and the discourse around incarceration. I
yeah.
feel that's
I,
like
I think you, yeah, I think you made the point excellently that it also limits our imagination in terms of what the future could be if we just think of certain types of people who are incarcerated and give them privileges who are we left leaving behind. And I think on the aspect of leaving behind, I think you did say that you did that work with the Kashmiri political prisoners in a way where we I don't think I have ever heard of what happens to them in Indian prisons until I saw your writings in a way. Do you want to touch upon that in terms of how they're treated in the system, and also maybe after that as a follow up, like, I mean, who are leaving left behind, the situation of women in prison and that you have found as well?
right. Yeah, yeah. So most Kashmiri prisoners are actually they are lodged in prisons in Indian prisons. They're not in like in Kashmir, and they're booked under either UAPA or under the Public Safety Act, and most of them, like the ones that I had actually spoken to, have dealt with incarceration for a very long time. Like, as in, it's not like months; they're talking about many years. And they have multiple cases against them. They have trials across different Indian states. So if they are like actually lodged in say Tihar jail, and they have a case pending in the neighboring states, and they've not been taken there, and they're like, there is a reason why they're actually kept in a prison which is away from their own space, because geographically Delhi, Tihar is so different than Kashmir. uh, the summers, the winters, everything is so different and harsh, and like it's impossible for them to actually survive. The especially the summers of Delhi. So these prisoners were they were all actually in for their political belief, and all of these incarcerated persons were facing uh, a lot of issues vis-a-vis their court dates, their access to their family members, not getting that weekly mulaka, the weekly visit of the family members, or a phone call. And weekly visits for the family was also becoming that much difficult to actually come all the way from the valley to Delhi. So among all of that, there was a special kind of punishment that was that the Indian state decided to come up with for the Kashmiri prisoners. So most of them were actually kept in rooms which did not have ventilation. Uh, they were denied ventilation, and the uh, the 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 prison which has bars, the bars were actually covered with either with thin cardboard sheets or things like that. Like, they were actually like trying to keep them completely packed in that room, and they were given fans, uh, table fans, which would only blow air on a very high speed, and that air that it would actually emit was it was very dry and very hot. So the whole idea was, if you want to use the fan, you use it this way, or otherwise you don't use one. We are not going to provide you a ceiling fan or even a ventilation. And the phone services were made available to them, but it was kept so far away from the barracks that they were kept in, that they had to walk in the sun, and they would actually be allowed phone services only in the afternoon, not in the morning, not in the evening. So one had to actually walk a distance like 500, 300 meters, whatever the distance they had to walk in the sun. Walking in that sun at that point in time in the afternoon is impossible. Uh, so most of them, like especially the women prisoners that I spoke to, had they were aging. They had like multiple ailments. Some one of them had required like a serious medical intervention. She had some spinal injury and she needed to be operated on, but it was all denied. Like getting an access to medical facility outside the prison was absolutely not possible. Within the prison also, they were not actually given that, and they were they, like segregation is something that one would actually talk against, but in their case they wanted to be segregated for their own safety. As Kashmiris in an Indian prison, like it was impossible for them to actually survive without getting targeted. But the whole the prison officials made it a point to keep them amongst the right wing radicals, and generally just like making them that much more vulnerable, that much more exposed to situations inside, that you are constantly under the threat. Like your life is constantly like you are constantly fearing for your life, nothing less. So yeah, like yeah. So these stories I had actually, and that story also happened through somebody through an anonymous handle had posted something about Kashmiri prisoners on Twitter, and I later found out that this individual's both like mother and father were actually in prison, and then he was willing to actually let his name out, and then like I actually also quoted him extensively in the story. So yeah, like I think somebody made, like it's so impossible for us to actually know what is happening inside, and somebody made that one one move of like putting that one small thing out as a small tweet, and then he actually helped me get in touch with some 8 9 more families, and uh, through them like I had sent some questions, and they asked those answers in the WhatsApp video call, and then they recorded those voice for me, and then they sent it across, and then we did the story.
And thank you for that. And when you say political beliefs of Kashmiris, you mean they want self rule, I guess, for Kashmir
Yeah.
in a way. So okay, so these are the political prisoners we should talk about too when we talk about political prisoners, I guess.
Yeah.
And the situation of women in prison. Can you tell us about the things that women face, and also the experience you had in Karnataka when you spent some time in prisons?
Yeah. So the prisons, so prison as a structure has a gender, and the gender is male. It is actually built keeping a male prisoner in mind. So also the Indian prison population, if you look at it, like less than 20% of the prison population is actually comprises of women uh, and trans community persons. So you have like just a small population amongst the prisoners, which actually which is actually occupied by women. The services are not meant to cater them. So, like in Maharashtra's case, where I work very extensively, Maharashtra has 60 different prisons. Of that, only one prison is actually built for women. That is in Baikala. It's called Baikala prison. The 59 other prisons are meant for men. So if somebody is getting arrested in, say, Gadchiroli district, which is almost like 1,000 kilometers away from, I am guessing, like from Mumbai. So one can't expect the prisoner, like then the incarcerated person, to actually like to be brought from that district to Mumbai. So what happens is in Gadchiroli prison, a small space is actually etched out, and a small prison is created inside the prison space where women are actually kept. Uh, the the prison authorities actually look at them as some prized possession who need to be safeguarded from the world outside. So they are actually under a lot more scrutiny than the men. And women like uh, women who might have not worn sari all their lives, or maybe who not might not be used to actually taking ghungat, like actually covering their heads, are made to cover their heads, are made to cover like the whole idea is like to actually like modesty, like that's the entire focus on of those prison structures. In these prisons, then you have women, menstruating women, you have women who have serious health issues, gynecological issues, you have women with children. These prisons are not equipped to actually take care of that, because your prison department has only one doctor who is a general physician, who has absolutely no understanding of gynecological issues that a woman can actually be facing. Has There is no pediatric doctor there, and then you do not know, the doctor doesn't know how to actually take care of a child with a pediatric issues. So like none of the prison, like, so the prison don't have any of the services. Like the only prison that has some semblance of some medical facilities specially designed for women is the Baikla prison in Maharashtra. So women have to then make do with whatever little is like actually available, the scrap that is actually thrown at them. They're supposed to actually just like make do with that. Coming to my experience of Karnataka prison that you asked now, so in Karnataka, there is this one prison in Gulbarga, a district in Gulbarga, a district in Karnataka called Gulbarga, where the prison is actually. So this used to be a horse stable uh, in the British time, and that horse stable over, and then I think after the Indian government decided that they want to have a prison, but they did not want to build a new prison. So they decided that they are going to convert a stable into a horse stable into a prison space. Now the structure is only meant to keep a cattle, and there is absolutely no change to the structure. Like they have not done any work towards changing that structure. So it still is important. It's not livable. It's not livable by a human being. It's meant for an animal. So here, I had actually met, and here both men and women prisoners both were actually kept in the same space, in the same confinement. And there I had interacted with both men and the women. And when I went to the women cell, there were around 25 to 30 women who were actually lodged in that space. Very small, cramped space, didn't have space even for 10 persons to live properly, but there were like some 30 women actually like stuffed in that space. And I was actually like looking at the kind of cases that these women were booked under. So, so a couple of them, like in the beginning, like when I like looked, like they were all in for like murder. They had actually killed somebody, and and it was very different than the my general understanding that women are usually co-accused in a case. They must have actually helped a male member of the family to say destroy evidence. That is the common understanding. That's a textbook understanding that I had of women and their involvement in crime. And or they must have actually come in for in a dowry case. They must have tried killing their daughter-in-laws, or must have helped some other members of the family to kill or maybe attempted to kill a daughter-in-law. But in this case, it was very different. In this case, like these women were actually in uh, for having killed their children, girl child like children, and for also having attempted to kill themselves. They had attempted suicide. So they were booked under 302 and 309. 309 being attempt to suicide, and 302 for murder. So now these women, in some case, like a woman has given to one girl child, the family is unhappy with it. They are like really they're making her life difficult. Her like she's enduring that pain, and then she actually has a second child. The second child also happens to be a girl child. So then she realizes that if she continues to live, then it is going to be impossible for her to survive. She can't die alone, because the girl children also will also be ill treated. So in that like desperation, she decides to end her life and also the children's life. So she either jumps into the well or a lake or a river, whatever water body is available around her. And or in one case, like somebody had consumed some poison, and the children die. They're like infants, they're like newly born, they die. And the woman survives. So woman who was actually tried to kill herself who should actually be like she's a victim, like she's clearly somebody who doesn't want to live, who's a victim of her mental health is in shambles, is suddenly looked at as a woman who's a murderer of children, and she's in jail. And these were like just not one or two cases, these were like multiple cases that I was actually like coming across. And I realized like that there is, I don't know if we even have any vocabulary to actually like describe, or in our gender politics, in our gender understanding, to actually even talk about these women, because I have not really like come across uh, uh, any conversation that is actually around the incarcerated women. Like it's like in our feminist, in our gender politics, have not really come across. And these are very, how do we actually like then discuss and talk about these women? Like, do we look at them as accused? Do we look at them as victims? Do we look at do we talk about the society that has actually pushed them to this? Like, there's just so many questions that one needs to address.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And
Yeah.
I think the aspect of mental health is another one which we could talk about. But I think we're running out of time. But yeah, I think we have known that, like in even when Professor Sai Baba was outside for a brief period before his passing away, did talk about the mental health, uh, like if prisoners with mental health issues were not getting any support, and in some cases were just chained and left to their own in a way. I think in a way, like I think even in other countries like the UK and US, there are stats which suggest that there are more people in the prison with mental health conditions than people who are getting help outside with mental health conditions. So it kind of shows that the society prefers to incarcerate people with mental health conditions than actually deal with them as a society. Okay, so I think some final questions. So I think Harini has a question saying that, has a couple of questions. Is that, has RTI helped you in gathering points for your research? If yes, how? And also, I think a great suggestion about, could you share excerpts of any of your response letters that you received? I think that will be a great project. I think you should look at actually like
Yeah,
archiving
I could.
all those records of your interactions.
Yeah. I could share, but I don't have it handy. But yeah, if somebody needs it, like can drop their email ID, I will be happy to send a few actually. Like I have a book, like a notebook, a diary that a person had written, a trans woman had actually written while she was in prison, and she gifted me her diary. After one of the stories that we had written, I didn't want to keep the copy, but she wanted me to keep this one particular copy. It has a lot of poems and her life in prison. Some very painful incidents of sexual assault and things that has happened to her at other women, trans women inside prison. So yeah, like there are like a whole bunch of the diaries and letters that I have. Like I'd be happy to share it.
I
Yeah,
think
and
we
these are them, and they are and these are given to me with the idea that it can be made public. So like
yeah,
I'm
I think we plan to archive some of what we've discussed, and if you want, we could potentially archive that on our website or Professor Saibaba's website, like study circle website. But question about RTI, does that help in your
oh,
research?
no, not at all, not absolutely not, because RTI. So, like these are any information that I've asked from prisons and also from the NHRC. The responses that I've always got is that these are personal information of a private individual and we cannot actually give it. And they have sought exemption, and absolutely no application. For no application, I've got information. But for applications like how many computers with video conferencing facilities do you have available in your prison? Those data they have given to me. How many under trial prisoners who have completed more than half of their likely prison term, sentence term, those data, like they've given me numbers. That information has come to me. So information about individuals, about any particular case, if I'm actually following, of people who have died by suicide in prisons, and I have asked for the judicial inquiry, what do you say, judicial inquiry reports of those individuals. They've not made it available. Forget about RTI, they've not even made it available to the family members. So, like when family members have asked for postmortem report, like this is one thing that we are actually trying to get for one of the individuals who have died in Taloja jail. he was unwell for a good 4 days, and he was complaining of he was writhing with pain, and he was complaining, and he was constantly pleading and begging the prison official that, like, take me to a private hospital, because the prison hospital doesn't have the facility. He was not taken, and finally he died. And the postmortem report says he died because of heart attack. That man had pain in his lower stomach, and it could be like, maybe like there was some kidney ailment that he had, like one doesn't know, like a heart attack could have happened eventually, but he was he was crying for help. So then the family has like we're trying to actually get like some way of getting the PM report and also the death certificate. Like the family took like good 3 weeks to even actually access the death certificate. So yeah, like it just becomes very difficult. Yeah. So RTI is definitely not the way to go about.
Okay, cool. Thank you for sharing that, and I think that's really useful. So, in closing remarks, then, because we're running out of time, is that
We can ask if anyone have a question, can ask now. Like if
sorry, I
Sukanya
think that
Shantha want to take it,
people are asking.
yeah, they can ask not only chat, they can ask if they can raise their hand, they can ask questions. Yeah,
Yes.
running out of time.
Shravanti, do you want to come off mute and ask?
Yeah. Thank you for organizing this, and thank you so much, Sukanya, for talking us through all of this. Like sometimes when I hear you talk, it feels like you're just making up stuff because it's so bizarre. It's so
I wish I was.
it's so unbelievable, and I know you do this. Like I'm sure you do this work at great cost of your personal self. So thank you first of all for doing the work you do. I just want to circle back to the question of abolition. Um, and if that is something you have seen being discussed in the Indian context at all, has that come up through your work through human rights organizations and many things you've done? Is that even a conversation? And my second question is like how in the current LA fires, prisoners are being used as firefighters, slave labor is happening there. Does the Indian state also do such horrific things? I'm sure it does worse, but similar things as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So yeah, the discussion around abolition hasn't really happened in the Indian context, at least not. It must be happening in smaller groups like the study circle that we are discussing now. But in the larger context, like where people are working in prisons, working with prisoners, working for prisoners, like it's really not happened, because most of them are so dependent on what do you say, uh, the state government's permission to actually access this prison. So they don't have but they really don't have a scope of actually talking about dismantling the prison structure. The moment they start talking anything so radical, they will lose access. And also their understanding is also very of reforming these spaces. They don't talk about why these spaces exist. They're not asking these questions at all. They are wanting to just reform these structures, existing structures. And so if a prison has like is providing dal and chawal, then can we actually add sabzi to their one extra green vegetable to their daily meal? That is a kind of work that they do. If somebody is actually in jail for even after having been granted bail, can we organize a, a private individual or an organization which can donate money and get the person out, but not question the state or the judiciary why the person has stayed in jail after the bail? So that kind of work is not happening. So abolition is clearly not a discussion. Uh, about prisons using incarcerated individuals for labor. Uh, you might be aware of this department called the PWD, the Public Work Department, which does our road work and which does all the construction work. It used to actually be the prisons work department in the past. It was later, like in the independent era, like it was actually like the name changed from prison work department to public works department. So, so prisoners, like the whole understanding of incarcerated persons were that they are free laborers who are available to you at your beck and call for whatever work you want them to do. That was the whole understanding of the prison structure. Uh, our our uh, our prison structure doesn't allow prisoners to be outside the prison because we feel they're like too unsafe to be actually let out. We don't even encourage the whole idea of open prisons, like uh, Rajasthan has the maximum number of open prisons. I think it goes to 20 or 30. I'm forgetting the number. But now the state government is slowly shutting them down. So there is no concept of open prison, and there is no concept of like actually like the concept exists, but we are not really like in favor of that concept. So prisoners are not taken out, but the labor inside the prison is it's cheap labor, unpaid, long hours, work which requires a lot of like a lot of manual work that goes into it, and then you get paid like just in like petty cash has been given to you in the name of like salaries. So yeah, like prison labor gets like clearly exploited on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, like not something in like in reference to LA.
Cool. So, has anyone got any other questions? If not, we'll just conclude in a way. So, in terms of next steps, Sukanya, where do you think the conversation should go from here? In a way, like, I mean, we know that there is a rich history of like work which is done in American context, not so much in any other context, and how can that work be? Uh, I think reconstructed for Indian context, and what is it? What are the need? What do you think that needs to happen there?
So the literature around prisons that we have actually seen that has come out from India is written by academics or people like me, or mostly people who know that we have some kind of capital which will protect us from actually being inside prisons. So we are not the directly impacted people. And the other literature that has come out is by those who identify themselves as political prisoners. We don't really have the stories and narratives coming by the ones the real like the prisoners, like the 5 lakh prisoners who actually uh, get processed by the criminal justice system on a yearly basis. We don't really have their stories coming out and their narratives coming out firsthand. I feel that is something that we need to actually build on very serious note, and like we seriously need to like work towards that. That's also something that I am actually trying to work. I'm trying to like find a way to like do that. In fact, like something like me and one of my colleagues, like we are like actually doing something which we are very excited about. But paucity of time, funds, all of that is also causing the delay of it. But yeah, but that's I think that's something that needs to come out, because uh, I think that nothing can be more powerful than actually hearing and like listening to their stories like directly, like and them taking charge and them being at the forefront of saying like what exactly the future of prisons or abolition, the way of like to go ahead with abolition can actually be in India. Like I think that's something that we need to do.
Thank you so much, Sukanya. That is a fantastic way to end this. But I'm sure we will be in touch, and we would really appreciate your support on expanding these conversations. So, okay. And is there anything else you would want to say as closing notes? If not, we can.
I think I've spoken a lot already.
Now you,
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like we could go on for a bit. But
Yeah,
thank
this
you,
season
everyone.
really went on really well. I really thank you. Sorry, we thought like we know many things about prison, but I think you gave those insights about too many things about the points, the ratings, and how the judiciary is failing, actually failed the system itself, and how the police, how is supposed to be like. Yeah, there are many things which we all should learn and work on this thing. Thank you for your all
Thanks,
this
Raman.
thing. Yeah.
Thank you.
And
Thank you
and
very
and
much.
and I think we will continue. We would like to continue on more on presence, and further we continue on many things which are actually on the side of politics and struggles, and uh, your points about how the political definition of political prisoners should be changed, and how it's been classified, and how the feminist and political movements also like really debate in the classes, and like how they romanticize actually what they're really looking in the top, but like yeah, so many things we have to look into the very critical way, all these things which, because the prison and many things are really inhuman. So yeah, thank you for all these things, and yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you
Thanks
very
so much, Ramu. Thank you, Praveen.
Thank
Thanks
you
so
all.
much.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.